Sony has announced that the PlayStation 5 is due for release next fall in 2020, and a lot of people are excited for the PlayStation 5. Well, I'm not. See, when it comes to the PlayStation brand, I have bought every single PlayStation console from the very first one all the way through the current iteration, and that also includes the PlayStation Portable. As far as I'm concerned, the PlayStation 2 is not just the best PlayStation console. The PlayStation 2 is the best video game console of all time. The era that the PlayStation 2 resided in is the best generation of video games, which is the 6th video game console generation. The 7th video game console generation was also a great generation for video games. It introduced a lot of great franchises, from Uncharted to Assassin's Creed to Dead Space to Gears of War and so on and so forth. Now, the PlayStation 4 is a great console, but the problem with the PlayStation 4 isn't the console itself, but rather its library of games. Something I always see when it comes to these fanboy wars that Sony fans love to bring up, these PlayStation fanboys, is that the PlayStation has a stronger list of exclusives than Microsoft. They're correct. The PlayStation does have a stronger list of exclusives, but if you look at the whole list of exclusive games that has been released on the PlayStation 4, most of them are not worth playing. Now, I've personally gone through and added my personal touch to each of these so-called exclusives for the PlayStation 4. Basically, anything that's VR is bullshit. I don't see the attraction in playing video games with the goddamn bucket on your head. So anything VR to me is just nothing but a bunch of nonsense. And of course, you have your typical remasters, of which Sony has released too many of those this console generation, which is just older games re-released with some minor graphical enhancements, which is nothing special. And then you have a bunch of indies, which no one really cares about, except a very small niche audience. But there's two games on this list that I really want to talk about, that I really want to discuss. Two games that are considered to be not just some of the best games that have been released on the PlayStation 4, but these two particular games are heralded as two of the best video games of all time, period. And realistically, both of those games are overrated as hell. Now, the two games I'm talking about is Bloodborne and God of War 2018. Now, Bloodborne for sure is an overrated game. All of the Souls games are overrated games. They have a lot of issues, which range from gameplay to the lack of storytelling, graphical issues, as well as a general problem in the target audience that those games are catered to. And Bloodborne is no different in this regard. Now, despite the fact that I think Bloodborne is an overrated game, I also think that Bloodborne is genuinely a good game. It's a game that I bought day one, it's a game that I platinumed in a week, and it's a game that I bought the DLC for and completed that to a 100% as well. But the interesting thing about Bloodborne is that if you look at the sales figure of the game, worldwide, Bloodborne has sold a little over 3 million copies, which means that it's a niche game. Not too many people bought Bloodborne, despite the fact that ignorant modern video game journalists have overpraised and overrated the fuck out of the game. And the vocal minority within the Souls community considers Bloodborne to be one of the best games ever, which of course it's not. It's anything but. And of course, most of the game's sales came from North America and Europe, which is funny because it's a Japanese game and the game sold the least in its home country, Japan. So perhaps Bloodborne isn't as great as everyone says it is, which has been my point about the game for the longest time. The second game, God of War 2018, that game is not much better than Bloodborne. I consider God of War 2018 to be one of the worst games to come out during the 8th console generation. In fact, throughout the recent history of my channel, I have spoken multiple times about God of War 2018 and how much I think that game is horrible, and how it betrayed what was so great about the God of War series in the first place. Now, once again, most of the game's sales came from North America and Europe. The game sold the least in Japan, again, as well as other countries around the world. In total, the game has sold over 6 million copies, which is good. That means, from a sales figure perspective, the game is a success. But if you compare Bloodborne and you compare God of War, now these games, once again, are considered to be two of the best games released on the PlayStation 4, and they're considered to be two of the best games of all time, in some circles anyway. If you compare the sales figures of God of War and Bloodborne to the overall sales figure of the PlayStation 4 itself, Sony has sold over 100 million units of the PlayStation 4. Less than a quarter of all the people who have bought and owned PlayStation 4 consoles own Bloodborne and God of War. And probably less than even that actually even completed either game for the people who did actually buy those games, such as myself. So this goes back to what my main problem is with the PlayStation 4's library of exclusive games. If you look at the previous two PlayStation consoles, the PlayStation 2 alone has almost 500 exclusive games that only came out only on the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 3 has a lot less games than the PlayStation 2 did as far as exclusives go, but it still has over 100 exclusive games that came out on that system. The PlayStation 4 only has 79 exclusives that have been released up until this point. And by the time the PlayStation 5 comes out next year, in 2020, that list still won't be at 100 games strong. They went from 470 with the PlayStation 2 to 185 with the PlayStation 3 to just 79 with the PlayStation 4. This is multiple years into this current generation of video games. That's not a good thing. That's horrible. And then you have certain games like Nier Automata, which was released on the PlayStation 4 as an exclusive at first, and later that game was ported to the PC, and now you can also play it on the Xbox One. So the whole bragging about the exclusivity of the PlayStation 4 as far as its library goes, its content library, that's bullshit. As far as I'm concerned, the only two video games that are PlayStation 4 exclusives that are must-have games that I've played this console generation is Spider-Man and Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a brand new IP, and really the only brand new IP that's been worth a shit the entire console generation. And I'll discuss more about that later. 2 games out of 79 that were actually worth buying at full price is not a good thing. Even if you love Bloodborne and you love God of War, that's still only 4 games out of how many games that's been released across a 6-year period, going on 7 years. Once again, that's not a good thing. Why would I be excited for the PlayStation 5? And the previous console has less than 100 total exclusives, and less than half of them were actually worth buying. Makes no sense. And then you have some of the new features that the PlayStation 5 is going to have. So you have typical upgrades when it comes to the USB ports, the random access memory, the hard drive, which is going to be a solid state drive, which means the console will operate faster. Although I believe solid state drives have less memory than typical hard drives, normal hard drives. So it's a double-edged sword in that regard. But then you have some of these new features that I just don't give a shit about. I don't give a fuck about haptic feedback. That tells me that they're just putting more vibration into the controller. I don't want more vibration while I play video games. These controllers have enough vibration as it is. I don't give a fuck about ray tracing. I don't give a fuck about 8K. Apparently the system can run 8K, which is ridiculous. Most people barely have 4K at this point. How the fuck is this thing gonna run 8K? Sounds like they got some liars working over there at Sony. I don't give a fuck about adaptive triggers. I don't care about most of these things. Most people will not care about these things, except hardcore gamers. I'm a hardcore gamer myself, and I don't give a shit about what kind of processor that the system's going to have. I don't give a shit about threads. Sony needs to thread together some more first-party studios so we can get some more new IP next console generation, which is something that's been severely lacking in the 8th console generation. Then there's all these delays with all these so-called exclusive games. Seriously, type in any PlayStation exclusive that's been released this console generation. Just about all of them have been delayed. Bloodborne, delayed. Drive Club, delayed. Uncharted 4, delayed. Horizon Zero Dawn, delayed. The Order 1886, delayed. Days Gone, delayed. The Last of Us Part 2, delayed, and that's recent. Why am I buying a console just to anticipate games that just keep getting delayed over and over again, and then half the time when these things come out, they're not good? Days Gone wasn't a good video game. Days Gone is a piece of shit. The Order 1886 wasn't a good game. That's a piece of shit. Drive Club wasn't a good game. That was a piece of shit. Half these games aren't even fucking good, and you're just waiting all this time for them to come out. and they turn out to be less than mediocre. Once again, why would I be excited about the PlayStation 5 and all this nonsense was going on with the PlayStation 4? Then you got to look at customer support. This console generation, I've been suspended on PSN twice. The first time, I don't even know why I was suspended. It's just something random that happened out of nowhere, and they couldn't even tell me why I was suspended. The second time, I was playing Mortal Kombat 11 online. I encountered a piece of shit who sent me a message, so I sent him back another colorful message. And he reported me, and I got suspended for a week. Here's the thing. When I was suspended, I was still paying Sony a monthly subscription for PlayStation Plus. A subscription that I couldn't use because they suspended me for a week. Why on this earth would I support a company that can just suspend me whenever they feel like it, and I'm paying them money for a service? And anyone who knows anything about Sony's customer support, especially specifically their PlayStation customer support, it's horrible. And there have been YouTube videos and online forums and blogs of people who have dealt with PlayStation customer support, and it's not a good support system. It's not good customer support. Sony hasn't even tried bothering to improve their customer support. Once again, why would I want to deal with all this bullshit for the next console generation when I can easily just, either drop video games altogether, or if I really want to game, just jump to the PC instead of supporting any of these console manufacturers. And lastly, the main reason why I'm not excited about the PlayStation 5 right now is because this console generation, which is the 8th console generation once again, has been the worst console generation ever in the history of the medium of video games. It's been horrible. This generation has been known as the remaster generation. Most of the games that people have looked forward to the entire console generation have been remasters. And a lot of the new IP, some of which I've mentioned earlier in the video, have been failures. Days Gone, Drive Club, No Man's Sky, The Order 1886. All of these games are new IPs and they all failed when they release. Either they were released prematurely before they were finished, or they were finished and they came out and they had technical issues, or they just weren't good in general, or a mixture of the three. I found this article on some Xbox website that correctly states that Grand Theft Auto 5 has been the most successful game of the entire console generation. Grand Theft Auto 5 has outsold pretty much any PlayStation 4 exclusive. And technically, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a last generation game. It's a 7th generation game. It was first released on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. It was later ported to the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, and it has continued to outsell everything that's not Call of Duty. And then, once again, when it comes to new franchises, new IP, there really hasn't been any new IP that's been worth a shit this console generation, with the exception of Horizon Zero Dawn and probably the Middle-earth games. And even the sequel of Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, was heavily criticized for its inclusion of microtransactions and the changes it made to the original Lord of the Rings lore. Now, if you compare that to the 6th console generation, like the article states, in the 6th console generation we got Halo, we got Forza, we got Splinter Cell, we got God of War, Grand Theft Auto 3, we had great sequels such as Half-Life 2, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Halo 2, God of War 2, games such as that. The 7th generation, we got Gears of War, we got Mass Effect, we got BioShock, we got Left 4 Dead, Assassin's Creed, Uncharted, Batman Arkham. But going into the 9th console generation, either those franchises are now dead, such as BioShock, or Mass Effect, or Batman Arkham, or Uncharted, or they've been altered to the point of being completely unrecognizable, such as God of War and Assassin's Creed and Gears of War. The only games that we've had to look forward to the entire console generation is nothing but a bunch of sequels, and mediocre sequels at that. Games such as Metal Gear Solid 5, Far Cry 5, so on and so forth. And that goes back to what I was saying in part 3 of my small series, The Problem with the Video Game Industry. Sequelitis. Where's all the new IP? Where's all the new franchises? That's something that this console generation really failed at. And it's not just with Microsoft. Sony also failed to really create some interesting, new, long-lasting franchises. A lot of the new IP that Sony released this console generation are bad games. They're just not good. Once again, Knack, Drive Club, No Man's Sky, Days Gone, The Order 1886, the list goes on and on and on. this console generation has also introduced these business models that are very corrupt and anti-consumer that really make me question why I play video games at all anymore, such as loot boxes, microtransactions, the games as a service model, patch updates, the day one patch, DLC hoarding, new games being re-released anywhere between 6 months up to a year later, with all the content on the disc, that's repackaged and retailed for almost full price again. And all of these things are just going to carry over to the next console generation. Once again, as someone who likes to exercise some common sense, why would I be excited for any of this shit for next console generation? What's there to be excited for? I'm supposed to be excited for more loot boxes, more microtransactions, more games being released incomplete, more DLC hoarding, more patch updates. What's there to be excited for? More Call of Duty and more Assassin's Creed games? Fuck that. So basically what I'm saying is, I'm not saying I'm not going to buy the PlayStation 5, but right now it's looking extremely unlikely that I'm going to get the console right when it comes out, if I choose to get it at all. That really depends on what games Sony announces for it, and probably what I'm going to do is wait anywhere between 6 months up to a year after the initial release of the PlayStation 5 to see if the console is truly worth picking up. Because as much as I love the PlayStation 4, I think the PlayStation 4 is a great console. Like I said, the PlayStation 4 has the weakest content library in the history of the brand. And this particular generation of video games, once again, has started some different practices that I really do not want to be associated with when it comes to playing video games in the future. Now, Sony still has a chance to change my mind about the PlayStation 5, but from everything that they've revealed of it thus far, I don't give a shit. I don't care. And so that's what I got to say about the PlayStation 5 right now. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of information on the console, but enough has been revealed of it already to where I can make a general opinion about the console, as well as a general opinion of what I think needs to change in the 9th generation of video games. So, should the day come that I feel like my opinion has changed on the PlayStation 5, then I'll make a video about that. But until then, I just don't care.
Fatality. Cassie Cage wins.